particularly interested to hear from the three of you because I know that you've all had somewhat different experiences and you've all found ways to create your own paths. We have Beth Guterman Chu, June Iwasaki, and Andrew Armstrong. So I know it's a pretty broad topic, but basically, let's start with you, Beth. What have you been up to for the last 10 months and how have things been going?
Well, I would say, just like most musicians I talk to, that as soon as COVID hit, it just was the first time in my entire life that I hadn't had a concert to work towards.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I was faced with the question of, well, what do I play? Really, most of the time it's prescribed for you, or it's a project that you're working towards that you've made yourself. But it was actually very fun to have that time to practice with no pressure on my hands. I got to work on my playing and pieces I've never heard, but it was strange. It was very strange to play for myself, and I realized that oftentimes I'm thinking, well, what will this sound like in the hall, or what is my colleague gonna do next to me? And instead I got to just really think about myself selfishly.
Yeah, there was I think for all of us that little bit of getting back to basics, right? Of like, why do I do this? What do I get out of it? And yeah, it's strange after so many years in the business to not have that particular thing to work towards. Like I've always found that something really inspiring about working with students that are working so hard to learn this piece. And there's this, I mean, this is a terrible thing to say, but there's this little part of me that sometimes is like, but I mean, who are you going to play it for? Like, what difference does it make? It's a terrible thing to say, but because I always have that mechanism in my own head, like, I am practicing this because if I don't, then we've got a problem, and then like I can't feed my family. Like it's all tied into some very serious kind of logistical stuff. But yeah, being able to take that time to say, this is a piece that I'd love to play this piece, and maybe I'll just do this for me, and maybe I'll just try to get better just for the sake of getting better, not so that the concert in 2 days goes well. So yeah, no, as our audience probably knows, you're the principal violist of the St. Louis Symphony. So can you tell us a little bit about what the St. Louis Symphony has managed to do or not do in these months?
Yeah, sure. So back in the beginning, again, when really nobody knew what the virus meant for the States, we just canceled all concerts because really we just felt that it was not worth the fear of getting us sick or the audience sick to move on. And it was really, I would say, in the late summer that the orchestra really started ramping up projects. And it wasn't our normal life. Instead, we would go outside and play for one musician might play for one immunocompromised person outside 10, 20 feet apart in these very intimate, very meaningful little concerts that really were so powerful for both the audience and the musicians. Or we would play pop-up chamber music concerts in the park, Forest Park in St. Louis. We did all kinds of things, playing for healthcare workers, and then further in the fall, we started playing concerts in the hall. And it was either chamber music, which again, coming back and hearing colleagues in a hall. There's something about the acoustic of a hall, and I'm a string player, so hearing string instruments projecting and blending together. I was in tears almost every single night with those first indoor concerts. We also played chamber orchestra concerts with our amazing conductor, Stefan Deneve, and it's just been actually a really fascinating and fun experience having to do things outside of our normal realm. It's not to say that I'm not excited to go back to playing full orchestra concerts, but it's been a really important growth situation for the orchestra.
Well, it's a positive attitude and I think a real testament to what they've achieved at your orchestra. Now, June Iwasaki, you were the concertmaster of the Nashville Symphony, and I know that they've had other challenges. And talk to us a little bit about what things have been like for you.
I think it's been a weird time. It's nice to hear what other orchestras are doing. because we didn't get that opportunity. Unfortunately, when we shut down in March, when the pandemic originally first hit the U.S. To the point where we needed to cancel, they canceled immediately the rest of the season. That was through July, and that we pretty much understood. And during that time, we tried to create some online content and stuff. But unfortunately, when July came along, the symphony and the board had to make the most difficult decision I think that they've ever had to make, and that was to furlough the entire orchestra. And I think, looking back, of course, there was sadness, there was anger, but in the long run, you just had to think about what they were making a decision to make sure that there was an orchestra to come back to.
Yeah.
Because just there was no way they could sustain paying everyone.
Well, of course, your orchestra has that sort of double-edged knife. Is that what they say? Double-edged sword. You own your hall, which is one of the great halls in America.
Exactly.
But of course, so that's such a privilege during normal times. But yes, keeping that facility that must have been almost insurmountable challenge.
All of that was factored in. Obviously, the owning the building, making sure that the bills are paid and all this stuff. And then it was the toughest news I think for the entire orchestra was when I think we were the first major American orchestra to cancel the following season.
Right.
So they canceled 2021, which is where we're in now, and it's been tough and it's funny because unlike Beth, I took some time and just put the violin down.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel the urge to play for myself. I found other things, and like James, like you said, to have a goal. So I didn't have concerts to practice for, so I found other things to where there was a goal that I could see results in, and those involved baking, learning how to bake breads, and actually getting into the world of video and audio editing.
Well, and that we at SCMS have taken advantage of your new skills there. If our audience watched our performance from the summer of the new Aaron J. Kernis piece called Siren that Marina Piccinini performed, where she overdubbed all of these different. She overdubbed all.
Could you guys just speak up like you're in a larger space? That would be helpful.
Oh, they can't hear
Yeah.
us.
Thank you.
Closer to these as well.
We just think speak a little louder would be great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Our performance of Siren by Marina Piccinini, the piece for many overdubbed flutes, and that video was put together by Jun Iwasaki. You've been doing a lot of this now. Like different organizations have gotten in touch with you and say, hey, can you put together our remotely produced this, that, and the other thing? So you don't have to play the violin anymore.
No, to a certain point, it was fun. It was exciting. I still enjoy doing it, and I'm glad that I learned how to do it. But there was a point where I miss playing, and there have been a few occasions throughout the last 10 months where I've been lucky enough to travel and perform again.
Right.
And it's just such a pleasure to be here and playing chamber music again. So I can't say that the pandemic was a waste. We also created a new baby during the pandemic, and so I'm happy to say that we have a 1 week old at home that was brought into the world during this new time for all of us.
Born 10 months after the lockdown began for all the mathematicians out there.
Well, social distancing was hard.
Well, new creation's not maybe quite as exciting as a baby, but Andy, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your new creation. I mean, talk about being creative and making the most of things. You've created a new series.
Started a new series in my hometown, New Canaan, Connecticut. And really, if this tale is about only one thing, it's about my stupidity. Kind of at every step along the way. It's the thread, as it were, because you'll laugh to know that a week before the lockdown started, when it was obvious that coronavirus was a big deal and was going to be problematic, I drove to my hometown and I went to the big newspaper community meetings that they have where you can talk about problems in the town and also raise new issues. And I stood up and I said, I'm starting a new music series, everyone. This is what we're going to do. Follow me. It's going to happen. And by force of will and inspiration, we shall achieve. And people were like, this
Wish I
is
could have
great.
been there for that.
Yeah, well, I did it more theatrically. I gave you the toned down version for this. But there was a great response. And I came home to my wife. I said, it went really well. People are really interested, and this thing's going to happen. And then we said, good night, dear, and shut out the lights. And my eyes went, and I went, I just promised them we're going to start doing concerts in May. How serious is this coronavirus thing going to be? So then there were months of very, very little happening. And I remember calling you, James, and saying, what do I do? All these folks that are so inspired, and they're just going to think that I'm Mr. Flake, that I'm not doing anything now on this. And you were like, I think they'll understand why nothing's happening. But then there was this real question: do you start a series virtually? You know, I think it's a very different question. Do you go virtual with a 30-year history series, or even a 10-year history series? Do you go virtual to kind of preserve it and keep the thread going? But do you start one virtually? And I thought the answer to that was pretty obviously no. And then some of the people in the town reached out to me, some of the people that are now becoming board members and huge heavy lifters, who said, you know what, back in October, they said, our community needs this more than anything. People are so tired of not being able to do anything and be together in any way. That connection, we want that connection. And because it was still early October, we had the chance to do an outdoor concert. And the minute we made the tickets available, it was like within 12 hours, like, you're not allowed to come. And so it's just interesting that each organism that takes life has its own story and its own conception. And this one has a fairly original kind of story to it.
Well, you also have musical masterworks in Columbia. That's
Chamber Music on Main.
Chamber Music on Main.
You're thinking of
yes,
one.
thinking of the other one.
Yeah.
But Chamber Music on Main in Columbia, South Carolina, and you're also taking over a series in Beaufort, South Carolina. So your life has become more administrative over the last few months, and with the projects you're talking about, with all the time spent in front of the computer with the editing and putting together these audiovisual things. For me, with this organization, it's been creating so many different possible festivals. I feel like I'm creating 5 festivals for every one we actually do. Beth, have you found yourself stuck in front of a computer more than before? Are you stuck in the administrative world, or are you one of the lucky ones who's managed to avoid that?
So just a few years ago in the orchestra, I started signing up for committees. People asked me to get...
Why did you do that?
I know, it's like self-flagellating or something. But I basically am on what we call the Musicians' Council, which is what everyone else calls a committee, but we get in our dark robes and go into like a dungeon. No, so it's the Musicians' Council, and then I'm on the Artistic Council, I'm on the Social Media Council, I'm on the SOP Task Force, which is Standard Operating Procedure, and only has to do with COVID and what it means to get on stage, that kind of thing. So, oh my gosh, I have been on the computer like crazy on Zoom meetings, writing notes, writing agendas, all that stuff, and it's actually given me sort of a sense of purpose, and I can look back and say, oh, I remember August because that's when we were doing this. Whereas when that has sort of petered out, time sort of felt nebulous, and so yeah, there's that. I also rejoined social media. I hadn't been on Facebook or signed up for Instagram in at least 10 years.
Wow.
So that was different for me, and I've actually found it really enjoyable.
Don't give it time.
Yeah, exactly. But it's fascinating because, I feel like with COVID, sort of like the mental places that your mind can go to. I mean, this is for the people who haven't gotten sick or lost loved ones, but just sort of the everyday person who really hasn't been touched by it except for their way of life. Still, your mental places can get very dark, and this kind of thing really helped me. And I also started going camping with my kids. Without my husband, the 3 kids and I would just get in the car and drive. And
Did Johnny just say nope? Not going? How did that work?
It's just not his thing.
Not
And
his
you
thing.
know what? Honestly, my husband is also a musician. He's an amazing violist, but he's more of an introvert than I am. I don't know if you can tell. I'm happy talking, but
I don't think of camping with your family as being a particularly extroverted
Yeah. You know what though? With like a 4-year-old,
Oh.
an 8-year-old, and a 9-year-old in the house literally all day long,
Your boys can
it
talk.
was
Yeah.
just sort of good. Yes, it was good for us to get out of the house and give him some breathing room and quiet, and it was good for me to play with fire. And
It's amazing. You are by
Talk
no
about- we
means
talked about this
the
one.
only musician that I've talked to who's gotten into this. Yeah,
Mhm.
enjoying outside. We spend a lot of time inside. I mean, right now, of course, this is June and I were laughing about this just this morning. How the past couple days we've gotten to the center between 9 and 9:30, and we've left between 11:30 and midnight, and that this is just where we are. So yeah, I guess that has been an interesting thing. I've also probably spent more time outside because I've had fewer reasons to spend time inside.
I think the joining of committees, or councils for you, was a big thing for our orchestra when we
Picturing
were.
you on the Jedi
Yeah,
Council.
I like the
mean-
word council. I'm going to bring that up to our orchestra.
Oh yeah.
We changed all of our
It's a
committees.
meeting of minds.
Yeah.
It's not just yes.
But when we were furloughed, we formed about 19 of these committees so that we could produce content of our own because we were our own nonprofit at that point. We
Right.
became our own nonprofit. We're raising money for the musicians, and many people were on multiple committees, myself included. It makes you really appreciate, because you don't think about it when you're just playing the music on stage, how much work it takes to get a concert together, from programming, getting copyright stuff, and we've learned a lot of new language about just lingo about copyright, video syncing rights. There's all these things that because of the pandemic we've had to find more permission to do certain things. I've never used the word time lag, video lag. The word latency is
Audio
a
drift.
latency.
Yeah.
Audio drift. These words just now I can use at whenever. But I think it really put a perspective in a lot of our musicians, a new perspective of what goes on upstairs to put on a successful concert. And I think it really we grew together as a group.
Well, I think that brings up an interesting topic of, in what ways do you think the skills that the music industry has developed over these months, what skills do you anticipate will become bigger and bigger parts of our everyday life as musicians? For me, I think that people were broadcasting concerts. Of course, they've been doing this for generations now, but I think that there was in our industry always a little bit of it was a combination of the people, I would say any of the players in the industry have such a strong belief that the real product is the live on-stage version. And because of that, there's been this feeling that anything other than that is sort of ancillary or sort of at best it's there just sort of to help sell the real thing, and I think that also, to be honest and somewhat critical of our industry, I think there's been a certain amount of laziness involved. Like when it's come to digital media, it's like, well, that would be a very complicated thing to figure out a way for this to become a good business model and for us to figure out a practical agreement between managements and musicians. So we'll just make it an extra. We'll film some concerts, we'll put them up online, maybe we'll charge people a few bucks, maybe we won't, maybe we'll make it a donor benefit, who knows, we won't really think about it because it's not a real product. And then we're now in a position where it's not only the real product, it's the only product. Right. And you saw so much of that at the beginning, of some people kind of just putting out everything and sort of saturating the market with things of extremely variable quality. And then then you found that whole sort of dance of organizations trying to price things, and some were clearly priced too high and nobody wanted them, and some were clearly priced too low and they undervalued the product. And I think that we're finding our way with that, and I think that is, the genie's not going back in the bottle. I think that's going to continue to be a bigger, much bigger part of our industry, and it's probably a very good thing that we've had a reckoning with these topics later than we should have.
Yeah. But I think that we're learning lessons on both sides of the equation for sure, and I think you both have spoken to that, alluding to some of the more improved kind of intimate relationships that you are carving out with the music lovers in your community, those one-on-one concerts and such. And I think kind of early on, some people in our field had the idea, well, now that we're learning this technology and we're putting on this concert, well, this concert in a small town in the middle of wherever can now be an international phenomenon, and it can be viewed everywhere, and this could be a really big thing. And there was, of course, the immediate correction and realization that, every little town is doing this, and the market is totally saturated, and this realization that emphatically and by definition, our art form is one of person-to-person connection. And we have these really powerful tools that it's almost like it's almost like people get an artificial heart or an artificial lip. Like, we have these enhanced abilities with technology now that can be grafted onto the organism to make it even like a more bionic version. And I think we're going to emerge from this better than ever, having some of these skills available to us, some of these resources that have proven very powerful. But I think the organism is, revealed to us through all of this more emphatically than ever as itself, as a person-to-person connection that has to be achieved, whether it's calling a music lover in the community and talking about how is your family, and hey, take a listen to this piece a couple of weeks before our performance. Here's my favorite recording. Do you have any favorite recordings of this? I can't wait to hear what you'll think of our reading of it. These sorts of connections are really the lifeblood of what we do, and I think it's all revealed by how we've gone to the nth degree technologically right now.
I think it's interesting what you were saying about how music organizations more than ever need to depend on their communities, but there's also this incredible opportunity for something that really has quality to make its way out into the world. There was an incredible democratization, I think, of music that happened, within our lifetimes, but when couple generations ago, when all of a sudden technology changed to the point where you could just be some person and raise not that much money and make a recording that sounded every bit as good as anything put out by any of the major recording labels. And that, because there was, to a certain extent, for generations before that, there were certain controlling factors on careers. It's like the person that was taken on by that manager, or the person that was signed by that recording label, or whatever it was, or the orchestra that happened to be in that city that had the best press department or whatever. And then that changed because there could be some kid somewhere that raised a bit of money, made a CD that was on the same technical level as anything else, and it was like, wow, okay, that person's great. And I think that there's going to be some of that now going on where, yes, we cater, organizations cater to their audiences, but you can make a new audience anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's been such fun for us at SCMS to no longer be, I mean, the one silver lining maybe, and no longer be constricted by time and place. You know, our festival, there, very fortunately for us, there were lots of people that wanted to come to our concerts, but they couldn't be in Seattle on that day at that time, you know. And now, that's not a barrier. So that's a good thing. But then we keep coming back to the same thing, as you said, that ultimately what we're doing now at its very best is a great version of our art, but it can't replace the live aspect. I guess that brings me maybe to my last topic of conversation. It's optimism versus pessimism. And I mean, I think you're three reasonably optimistic people, but I'd be very curious to get your thoughts on what the future holds and how you're feeling about it. Do you think that our art form will come back strong? When? How? Lots of questions, but Beth, you want to go first?
I mean, classical music, as long as I've been alive, I feel like every 5 years there's an article that it's dying.
Oh yeah.
Right?
I'll tell you that I may have told you about this before. In fact, I wonder if you even had the same experience. I had a teacher at Juilliard that came in one day and was reading out of his folder and said, you know, the state of our so-called classical music industry, you know, is a state of crisis. Audiences are getting older and older. Young people don't care. It's considered elitist. The ticket prices are high. Blah blah blah. It was an article written by Robert Schumann in about 1845. And yeah, so
right.
We've been hearing this over and over and over.
Right. And I will say that it does not hold the place in society that it may have 100 years ago or even 80 years ago. There aren't as many pianos in people's homes, for instance. But I will also say that, you know, the 100 people in our audiences that we were allowed to have in the hall, we got dozens of letters every single concert that people were in tears the whole time. And myself too. When I walked in my first day here and I heard Max playing the piano with the door open, I was overwhelmed by the beauty of sound, and he was playing scales. You know, there is something very, very special about being able to hear people play anywhere in the world at any moment. And I am thrilled that now, in addition to the people who are able to walk in the door, we will be able to make art for others too. But just that real spine-tingling, hair-on-end feeling that classical music can give audiences, that's not disappearing. And our love for music and for our craft has really only grown. Every musician I've talked to feels so grateful to be playing right now and to be creating. So I feel like if anything, there might be a huge jump after this. Yeah.
Can I get a recording afterward of that speech you just gave? That was lovely.
Yeah, I'd have to. I mean, I agree. I think from what I see in Nashville, our patrons and donors aren't going to let the symphony die.
Yeah.
They are at that. I think we were afraid at first that they would get used to not having the symphony, and that was, I think, the fear for a lot of orchestras is, especially with these days in 2021, everyone's attention span is much shorter than it used to be. So they were just afraid that people would get used to not having to go to a concert.
Yeah.
But we've been proven wrong based on kind of our fundraising goals and stuff. It's great. Giving has gone up. The people that I've talked to think when I do catch them on the phone, they are just so focused on getting us back on stage because they miss the live experience. And so I think when it's safe, when everything is back to whatever the new normal will be, and that we are able to get together again in larger groups, I think we will come out stronger, and it will be different. You know, there are lots of things that, and I think, like you said, I think we're making changes on both sides. I think maybe shorter concerts, you know, we don't need 2.5-hour concerts anymore. I think, you know, a shorter, really good music and appreciative audience, and then maybe we can all kind of back away from these large projects and just focus back on why we love doing what we do. And not just doing big things because we can, you know?
Well, Andy, what about you?
Oh, I'm going to say something a little bit zany because I really like what you both said, and I'd just like to just say, I mean, I would just say the same things less beautifully than you both did. And so that having already been said, I'll allow myself to say something terribly whimsical, or maybe not whimsical. I've been listening a lot to Elon Musk give interviews and such, and he describes a future which is just minutes away from us almost. One of his projects is the neural net. I don't know if you've all heard about this. But basically, they're working on technologically mapping out. We all have neural nets in our own little jars here, but they're working on mapping that out and making that a technological reality, and then putting things in the skull that can interact. And then you're talking about quadriplegics being able to run and jump and do a pole vault, and people who were blind having full sight, and then all of a sudden, like crazy things, like being able to create memories of things you never did, like create that Bora Bora 1 month vacation you never had, or download. You could download if you had an amazing morning with your wife drinking coffee and talking about your children, and everything was just so perfect. You could just sort of save that to the drive and go back to that state later, and not even be able to recognize that it's a replay, but just relive like some really mind-bending things that they're talking about in our not distant future, like 5-10 years kind of things. And why am I saying all this?
Sounds like Elon Musk has been watching Black Mirror.
I was going to say, that sounds like an episode of Black
Or
Mirror.
writing it, I don't know, but
So
I think
we're all going to sort of be our own player pianos.
Well, what I want to say to you is that the precious metals that cost the most, you know, are the ones that are not found easily in the earth, and nobody's selling, you know, oxygen for $1,000 a breath because it's everywhere. And I think the experience that we are sharing and building with work, and the work and the toil and that time, what Shakespeare would call the rubbing, is an integral and important part of that whole equation. All of that, I think, becomes ever more precious if and when such futures as he's describing become a reality. The starvation for a real experience becomes a great one. And I think what we do and what our what music lovers who come to concerts and buy recordings, and what they do is they have this chance to shut out for some amount of time. I keep being extra grateful that I just happened to fall in love with music as a child, because absent that, I wonder what sort of defenses I would have right now to this relentless onslaught of devices whispering in my ear as I sleep, saying, I can take over even a little more of your life right now and make it better for you. And it's terribly special what we get to be a part of here in that context.
Well, I think that the history of this particular art form is that it has always meant just enough to just enough people.
Well
and
said.
you know, it's interesting that, you people talk about it, some people talk about our industry as such a natural part of the fabric of life that it's as natural as the sun rising and setting, and then there are other people that treat it like we're dealing with something so incredibly endangered. And I think that the reality is kind of in between. I think we would all agree that as classical musicians, whatever that means, that we are advocates for our profession, perhaps more than people in many industries. But I feel that the great music itself has, as you were describing, it has value that is irreplaceable and that is perhaps particularly identifiable in an age where so much of what goes on in our life is the antithesis of a great live musical experience. So yeah, I think I'm hopeful as well, and I think I'm proud of all of us and all of our colleagues out there as well that we found ways to stay artistically engaged, to stay gainfully employed, to stay financially solvent. But I'm also extremely grateful, of course, to the supporters of the Seattle Chamber Music Society who have allowed this festival to take place, who made our summer festival, our digitally streamed summer festival, such a great success. So I guess I will wrap this up for now with great thanks for Beth Guterman Chu and June Iwasaki and Andrew Armstrong. I am James Ehnes, the Artistic Director of the Seattle Chamber Music Society. We're here for these 2 weeks. We are recording 6 programs that will be streamed during the first 3 weeks of February. So please continue to check your social media accounts, to check our website at seattlechambermusic.org for all sorts of fun updates. It's a wonderful season we have, and before long we'll be announcing our summer season for July. So please stay tuned, and thank you all very much for your support.